Vice Chair Byerly,
Here.
and City of Richmond, Dr. Newbill.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance, and we do have a quorum.
Please let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. Mr. Lockwood, thank you for joining us, and we'll also have on the record that you are here for Ms. Page. We certainly send our best to Ms. Page as well. Thank you for attending. We are moving a little bit quickly here. Request for approval, should all board members have an opportunity to read the minutes. Of all executive committee members had an opportunity to review the minutes. Mr. Lockwood, I know you likely won't vote on this, but those in attendance who were in attendance, have any changes, any requested changes or amendments or additions? Is there a motion to approve by voice vote? Is there a motion to approve the minutes for November 10th, 2022 executive committee?
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second, Dr. Newbill?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Let the record reflect that Mr. Lockwood did not vote as he was not present at that meeting. So old business, item A, new office space. We do have a PowerPoint presentation to come before the board. We're also going to look at some different measures. And Ms. Heater's going to talk about that as we discuss some of the security practices that we have. But I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Heater at this point for the presentation on new office space, as well as that discussion for staff recommendations on security practices. Ms. Heater.
Thank you. I apologize for my voice. It mysteriously disappeared last week, so it's coming back in waves. I met with Chairman Davis, I guess about a week or so ago, and reviewed this deck. And really the purpose of this is just to kind of update you on some of the opportunities that I'm seizing with the new office space to think a little bit differently about security. And I mean that in kind of the broadest sense. As you know, over the last several years, I would imagine most of your localities have also been thinking a little bit differently about security. And so moving to the new location has certainly afforded us the opportunity to think differently. So this is twofold. One, to give you a little bit of context and background about what we've been thinking about and working toward within the office, but also to brief you on what to expect in the new space, because it will be different than what you are used to at the Stony Point location. So with that, just to kind of take you through a couple of points. Our new office space, the location and the management protocols and things like that do provide a new opportunity for us. And so we're getting to know our new landlord representative and they're getting to know us. And we're also going to be getting to know the other tenants in the building. We came from a space where we were the largest tenant. And so with that came a little bit of a different dynamic in the building, whereas now we're not the largest tenant. And so, we're not the first tenant into the space. And so we're conforming to some of the practices that have been put into place by Qualify. In preparation for the space and as part of our space planning efforts, I think most of you know this, but we did consult with the Richmond Department of Emergency Management. Bill Lawson is our vice chair of the Regional Emergency Management Alliance, and he connected us with one of the sergeants in the police department that liaises regularly with emergency management to think about actual physical security of the space and what we might be able to do there. So I'll walk you through a little bit of that. We also, as you know, are a member of the Virginia Risk Sharing Association. So VML Insurance, that's our insurance carrier, and they provide a wealth of information, training resources, and other types of incentives for public bodies to take security and safety seriously. So not only are we able to access some mini grant opportunities from them each year, but if you're a member might take advantage of aren't really applicable to us, but we still follow their best practices, even if we don't necessarily get the financial incentive. And then finally, we did contract with a new vendor as part of the build out, Johnson Controls. They're the new name of Richmond Alarm System. They have installed our security system, so they'll be kind of an ongoing partner and vendor for us. So when I think about PlanRVA's security plan, I think about access. I think about who can come and go from our space and from our building, and what that looks like. I think about training and education to make sure that our staff, you can't manage access well if our staff members don't understand why we're doing it and what we're trying to achieve. And then thinking through how we can effectively manage incidents, but also debrief our response procedures. So just to kind of walk you through a little bit of that from an access perspective, this is new information for all of you. wanted to be able to just give you a little bit of a lay of the land as far as security. This is not unique, and it was similar in our other building. The lobby doors are fobbed access. I think that I made up that word. Mr. Davis told me. But anyway, nevertheless, open access to the building from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Outside of those hours, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., you do have to use a fob to be able to access the building. The elevator and stairwells require 24/7 fob access all day, every day, regardless of hour. So that is a new feature for this building that we are not accustomed to. And so I'll walk you through a little bit about what we've planned to be able to make our office accessible to you, but also to members of the public when they need to be in the space. We do have a property management office on site. They're open from 8:30 to 5, which coincides with our regular business hours. So it is nice to have an on-site point of contact, which we did not have before. I've mentioned fobs a couple of times, and I'll talk about what this distribution looks like in the next slide. But we do have kind of a cool thing where we have, I think I refer to them as like a smart fob kind of idea. So we can actually program one device, if you will, to be able to talk to 3 different systems. So we don't have to have a badge and a key and a fob or a code or that kind of a thing. So this key fob integration allows us to access the parking garage through the vendor that manages that, which is Pivot Parking. You probably have seen their signs all around town. The key fob also allows us to access building access. That's managed by Drucker and Falk, our property management company. And then it also integrates with our suite access that's managed through Johnson Controls. So kind of a nice way that we're able to have 3 different systems feed into that one small thing. So for access, we are going to maintain fob access to the front doors. So when you come into our space, you'll enter into our lobby and welcome area. When we have a public meeting, our intention is to open those doors so that you don't have to be escorted into the space or that kind of a thing. But if you were to come by and visit, you as executive committee members would have access to actually fob in yourself to our office space. If you haven't been to the space yet, certainly you'll know that when you come. You will see that we don't have a front desk attendant, again, kind of thinking about security and our workflow. And so it was important to us to make sure that we had adequate security for our staff, that no one was going to just show up in the office that wasn't permitted to be there or expected. Again, the elevator and stairwells require that fob access, but we have negotiated through our lease agreement that we'll be able to coordinate with property management on days that we're hosting public meetings to be able to actually open the elevator so that anybody could push floor 3 on the elevator and come up. They would not be able to go to any other floor in the building, but they would be able to use that. Stairs, unfortunately, we don't have a way to turn that off. So it would be elevator would have that unrestricted access on meeting days. We will be able to do parking validation. So there are a couple of different mechanisms to do that. People who have a fob, the system connects. For example, when I go into the parking garage now and I swipe my fob on the machine, it actually tells me hello, and it tells me hello by name. So the system knows who I am. We will be able to submit license plate numbers as well. So if I don't want to reach my arm out the window and try to do it that way, the system should be able to recognize my license plate if I've had it registered with them. And then finally, there's the conventional way of just taking a ticket, and then you can bring that up to the office and we'll give a sticker for validation. So we're thinking that we've got kind of multiple bases there to cover that. We are planning to validate for all of our regularly hosted meetings for the commission, the CBTA, the Emergency Management Alliance, and the TPO. So should be able to make sure that parking fees are not a barrier to coming to the office. As far as issuing fobs to members, of course, all of our employees will have fobs and they'll be activated to enter and exit the parking garage, building, and the suite. In talking with Mr. Davis, our plan is that we would also issue fobs to members of the executive committee, and we would activate those so that you also would have access to the parking garage and to the building. So that you're able to come conveniently in and out of the space without having to make a prior arrangement with staff or that kind of a thing to greet you at the lobby entrance. Similarly, the plan would be to have that same availability for TPO executive committee members to be able to come in and out of parking, and the CBTA finance committee members to come in and out of parking so that they can do that. The assumption is that as the governing board of the entity that leases the space, you as executive committee members would have a little bit deeper access, so that if you needed to, for any reason, get into the building between that 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., you would be able to do that. But in talking with Mr. Davis, we didn't necessarily think that was a needed access that we needed to grant to other entities. Any questions on that? Okay. So on a training and education, so I will just go back for a moment on a procedural matter. We'll be providing names unless you tell me that you do not want a fob, you actually actively decline it. We'll be providing your names to the issuing, the property management company, and then they will in turn assign a fob and a number to us, and then they'll activate that through the systems. And so we'll get those to you over the next couple of weeks so that when you come after the new year to the new space, you'll be ready to go. So just wanted to note that. As far as training and education, we think a lot about, I think a lot about safety in the organization, not only from a physical security perspective and thinking about the potential for active threats, but also just, general employee safety, accident avoidance. We certainly want to make sure that we're not putting our employees at risk while they're undertaking the regular duties of their job, and that we've got a safe and accident-free workplace, which I'm happy to say we do have that currently. So, and then we also are regularly thinking about, as I'm sure all of you are, the threats that exist with cybersecurity. So this is, probably the scariest thing out there in some respects these days. And so we've been working, Mark Bittner on our team in particular has been working with lots of different opportunities to be able to think about how to create better awareness for our staff, not only in how they conduct their cyber life on site and through their work, but in their personal lives as well. So a couple of resources that we have available to us. We do have connections with the Virginia Fusion Center. If you're not subscribed and you want to get some sobering emails every day, I would encourage you to sign up for any one of the newsletters. We subscribe regularly to Cyber Aware, First Aware, and Scam Aware. So it's a great resource to be able to get alerts about things that are happening, not just in Virginia, but across the country. And the Fusion Center just does a phenomenal job about being able to get the word out about things that consumers should be aware of, but also we as people in the public sector need to be aware of to be able to protect not only the work product of our organizations, but the citizens that we serve. Again, VRSA has a number of training programs. They have a whole division dedicated to cyber. You might recall that last year they actually redesigned their insurance coverage, and so now we have actual separate cyber coverage. And so with that comes some other resources to be able to make sure that we're doing what we can to make ourselves as safe as possible. And then we regularly, through connections that staff have and recommendations and requests that they have, we regularly conduct trainings on staff to be able to make sure that our staff are aware. So in the new space as well as the old space, we were able to use a grant to purchase an AED machine. So if there were to be a situation where we were hosting an event and there was a heart event, we have the equipment on hand to be able to respond to that, and our staff members, a number of them, probably well over half, are trained and will continue to have that regular training to use that equipment. We also have had Stop the Bleed classes. We had a fire extinguisher simulation where everybody got to practice putting out a fire and safe distances using fire extinguishers. And I'm probably forgetting some, but we've had a number of opportunities to partner with the Department of Health and Red Cross and VAPDC, our emergency management, OSHA, and Department of Labor. So I'm really grateful for the resources that we've been able to tap into. So from an incident management and response perspective, we've been working on the development of a continuity of operations plan. I think COVID was an eye-opener for many of us that was not in my line of sight as far as thinking about what, I was thinking more like, well, what would be the reasons that our staff would have to go remote? Well, if the building burned down, if an earthquake or we suffered some kind of physical damage. And so We've been able to think a little bit differently about how our operations function. Certainly, even just this last month of doing remote meetings all over the region, it's enabled us to become a lot more, kudos to Sid and Janice for this, but to become a lot more nimble. So we're continuing to kind of feed that information into our continuity of operations planning process. So we will be updating our emergency operations plan this fiscal year. And we also, as you know, have the succession management plan that we're continuing to work and evolve. We have a safety officer, Ken Lance, is here in the room this morning, and we have a safety committee that convenes maybe twice a year or quarterly, just to be able to give recommendations to me on things that we should consider as far as safety. These are folks that I would say, not so much by virtue of their role in the agency, but just tend to have a predisposition to thinking about safety from a practical perspective, and have been great resources to me in thinking about what we should implement. And then we always benefit from the fact that we are an organization that is connected to our 9 jurisdictions that have a lot of sophistication in this space. So we're always kind of reaching out to people in our localities to ask, hey, how do you handle, or what do you know about, so that we can make sure that we're taking advantage of the intellectual capital that you all have. So that's really the presentation. I just wanted to be able to give you all that briefing, particularly in the context of the new space, but to put it in kind of the broader sense of how we think about safety at the commission.
So a couple of things have come up. One, I think it's great that we have our employee safety teams and those types of things. But as the world changes and the world evolves, we're looking at a couple of different things. And I think the new office space kind of was a gateway to that. Martha and I talked about a couple of things as it relates to cybersecurity. And y'all probably seen this. I know our very own Senator Warner has been pretty vocal about different apps. I think TikTok is one that he's really focused on. I don't know if y'all have this in your localities, but our locality in Hanover, all of our emails now have a disclaimer on the front. Unless it comes internally, it tells us that it came externally, right? Which is good. It's a little bit of a pain that you can't read the first 3 lines of your email anymore. But we do recognize, and I'm sure if y'all are like me, you probably get at least 15, 20 emails a day from some organization. You have no idea who they are. They're trying to sell something to the city of Richmond or to Goochland or to New Kent or whatever. So we're mindful of that. As it relates to physical security, our sheriff's office has done some work. We're part of a national program as well, but we had a presentation, and we've done it throughout the state. We've been called out to do this. It's been brought together from a national organization called SHIELD. It was originally titled Civilian Response to Active Shooter. And while it did have some substantial components to active shooting, it also has a lot of components to situational awareness, right? Making sure the doors are locked behind you and those types of things. Our sheriff's office is always pretty mindful, and I know some other localities are, that while we move and we have these regional meetings, I never really paid much attention to it, but local law enforcement does like to know when regional bodies meet, because should something happen, even if it was just a physical matter, somebody gets stuck in the elevator and you have 3, commissioners, 5 board members or whatever stuck in an elevator, there could be something impacted in the region. So as we look through all this, it's not anything to try to alarm anyone, but it is good practices. A lot of folks are putting these things in place. I talked to Mr. Vitokas over at Henrico the other day, and I know they're working on some different things. So we thought this would be a good idea. We'll incorporate that, particularly as it comes to building access. I thought that executive committee members should be able to fob in and out as they choose. If a commission member wants a fob to come in and out, they can certainly have one. We just weren't trying to restrict access. We have a limited number, but if somebody wants to come in, no commission member is going to have restricted access to PlanRVA. So we're looking at maybe having a presentation for employees. I think Martha's done a good job with that, but we are a little bit more aware as the world changes with cybersecurity, physical security, employee response to different things, that it's important. So we're looking at implementing that. Martha, I did want to talk about, and I'll open this up to, are you going into audit next?
Whenever we're ready.
So we got our audit back. Has everybody had an opportunity, maybe with the exception of Mr. Lockwood. Did you at least receive the email with the audit on there? Okay, you notice it's got draft written across it. That is not, the only reason that's draft written on there, it's not half baked. It's simply because it hasn't been accepted and submitted. So here's the logistical issue that we need to speak about, and certainly Mr. Holland.
Yes, sir, right here.
I am so sorry. I was
Several
like,
for
where did
Mr.
you-
Winslow
where
as
did-
well in
So-
his absence.
So we had an issue, and this is something we're going to have to talk about a little bit later. So we had an issue. There was a personal matter involving the audit firm, and that caused a delay in the audit. So it's still here by its deadline. But I think somebody at the audit firm's family member passed away. And while we're sensitive to that, that's probably not something in a normal course of business that should delay an audit to the extent that ours got delayed. I think we'll have to address that later as we move forward looking at our finances. What I'd like to do is take to the full commission with Mr. Holland's endorsement. I'm going to turn it over to him in just a moment. What we'd like to do is present the audit to the commission and then ask the full body for authority to allow the executive committee to reconvene. And we may have to do it by Zoom. I've spoken to Mr. Gregory before the end of the year, because we don't want to miss having this put in before the end of the year. I don't think there's any practical reason that we should miss that end of the year deadline. And I ask the full commission to allow the executive committee to review and accept, if there's nothing that comes from the commission, grant us that authority to come back to the executive committee and approve and submit the audit should it be approvable and submittable. Normally, we would do that at a normal commission meeting. I don't think there's no legal issue. I don't think there should be a problem, but we didn't want folks to feel like they were rushed. Here's your audit. You now need to let us do this. So we're going to ask that permission, and then we'll reconvene. I do want to kind of put on the radar with the executive committee. I know it's a busy time of the year, but there's really no practical reason for us to miss having this submitted should we not have any problems. We had no findings. The other thing is we're in great financial shape, and I think Mr. Hollins, in large measure, deserves that credit. You've worked really hard over the past couple of years. We only have to go back 2 years to remember what things were looking like. So I want to put that up for discussion here today, and then I'm going to ask Mr. Hollins to speak to it. Then I'll turn it over to Ms. Heater. But Jim,
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. I concur with your assessment. You're absolutely right. We anticipated November, but now we're in December. So that would be my recommendation. The good news is that we have an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion. Assets increase, as you well know, $157,000. Our fund balance at $1.4 million, $27,244. As you know, our target is $1 million. So we are in great financial condition at this point. And so that would be my recommendation, as you stated, Mr. Chairman, that we allow the executive committee to do so. I see no reason otherwise not to.
thank you, sir. So that's going to be the recommendation endorsement there. Recommendation for me, certainly heavy endorsement from Mr. Holland. Ms. Heater, you want to speak to the audit?
Yeah, and I'll also recognize Dan Van Dornick, that's here today, our Director of Finance. I'll cover a couple of things and then let Dan maybe share anything from with the numbers. But as you know, Mr. Davis has acknowledged. I mean, we've been through quite the evolution with our financial stability, and I'm proud to say and very pleased to say that I think this fiscal year's report shows that we are on track and we are doing what we need to do. In large part, that's been through working through making sure that we have the appropriate internal capacity and support. And so as of July 1, Mr. Van Dornick switched from being actually a contracted team member through VML VACO Finance and actually came on board as an employee of PlanRVA. And so number one, it was I'll say a compliment to the agency that he came in to help us solve and resolve some issues as a contractor. And then I presume liked enough of what he saw that he wanted to stick around. So that was really great to have him apply for and go through this selection process to be able to come full-time onto our team. And it's been a pleasure to work with him. He's brought a lot of, I think, ideas about how to build some structure around our decision-making, has expressed a tremendous interest in the work that our staff members do, and has during these last 6 months, while he's been certainly trying to work with Diane Fusco, our finance manager, to evolve. As you know, our budget was submitted to you in a different format that I think brings us additional transparency and clarity. They've been working to evolve many of those things. He's also made an effort to make sure that he's integrated into our staff, and I think our staff members have felt that and appreciated it. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Van Dornick if you want to hit any kind of highlights or maybe some observations that you have, because this is the first, I guess, official audit process that you've been through with us.
Just a few things to highlight. As Mr. Holland indicated, the opinion that we received was unmodified. So no reason to change, no reason to question the information that's in the statements. What also comes along with this is what's called a single audit, which is special procedures that are conducted on our federal funding, which is the largest source of funding that we have. And that audit and those communications to the Federal Clearinghouse are also unmodified. There are no findings, no questionable costs, no issues. So use the vernacular, it's a clean audit in both the financial statement respect and in that compliance respect. If you get to the back pages of the 51-page document, there are a couple of other reports on internal controls, compliance with the federal programs. A lot of words in those reports, but they're very important to understand that they've found no issues to be reported. They are clean. The organization is deemed to be in compliance with all of those requirements as well. So not only the general accounting principles, the way that presents the information, but also our compliance with those major grants. So that's important to note in this as well. From both aspects, there are two different types of statements. One that's closer to your corporate type statement with all the accruals, which include pension liabilities and leaseholds and those types of things. We had a surplus from the traditional government basis. We had a surplus there as well. And the fund balance continues to grow. And I think it's important to note that this was not always the case. A few years ago, we had to go through a few special steps to kind of regroup and take a look at your financial viability. And the steps that the organization took have actually worked. So congratulations. Not all entities are able to make that turnaround. To be able to actually achieve a surplus. It's not that we didn't use everything we had or that type of thing, but the surplus is important for kind of the future planning and stability of the organization. Not every year is as fruitful as any other. So it's good to have a reserve balance. There are opportunities that come along. Not all grants fully fund an opportunity. We have new opportunities in emergency management environment that require some matching funds. And as we get into the new reporting, you'll see how that works. But it's very important that you have that reserve base of finances to help fund the opportunities as they arise. You hate to see a good opportunity come and go, ooh, we're overextended or we don't have that base to go to. So that's one of the points that's not discussed in a financial statement or in an audit, but it's something that's very important to note, that this organization is in a strong position. You have a good fund balance, you have a good, strong cash balance. The way that we're billing receivables is working. The amount is very large, but that's because of the timing of June 30. We'll get into more of those details right with the finance committee. But as you read through it, come up with your questions and we'll have a way to organize those and respond to them. That the distribution was pretty quick last night. But those are really, kind of the points that I wanted to emphasize.
Make one other point.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. The other thing, and I know that we'll dig into this with the finance committee this coming year, but I guess it's a point of pride that I wanted to just be able to say to this group. Another component of the audit, the notes of the financial statements include a calculation of our indirect and fringe rates. These are what we use going forward. So it's a look back to be able to apply going forward for how we bill our grant funders. And so the indirect cost allocation is the mechanism by which we recover those expenses that the agency incurs that are not directly attributable to any given program. The best example of that is rent, or the time of personnel who are spread across all programs. And it would be frankly inefficient to itemize Dan's time across each of the grant programs, because he may touch any combination of them on any given day. So last fiscal year's audit reported a 53.43% indirect rate. I'm really pleased to share with you that this year's audit reports a 49.38% indirect rate, which essentially this may not be the accounting way to think about it, but I think of it as a measure of efficiency. And so that in my mind is an indicator that we are increasing our efficiency. Essentially the share of costs that we're incurring that are not directly attributable or allocable to grant programs is reducing. And so that's a great feat, I feel like. And that's, almost 3 percentage points is I think pretty awesome in the grand scheme of things. Similarly, our fringe rate reduced. The last fiscal year audit, the fringe rate was reported at 50. Hold on. Mouse isn't working. 50.93. Yeah. And this year it's 51.06. So it's hovering. And I think given the increases in health insurance costs, which is the large supply of that, but also the reality that we had a weird time in fiscal 2021 with the pandemic and the effects of not really anyone taking leave other than what they absolutely had to preserve their risk of loss of leave. I think it was great to be able to essentially see us hold the line on that. So, excuse me, I said that backwards. It was 51.06 last year, and it's 50.36 this fiscal year. 5093. Thank you. My computer's frozen. Thank you, Dan. As you can see, this is why he is so important for the agency. So again, I think it's just really great to be able to see us. We're not, I don't think yet in a state of normalcy as far as what we understand our leave liabilities and how we expect staff to be able to think about and use their leave going forward. But it's great to be able to see that modest reduction, but overall just general stability in fringe costs. So I just wanted to point that out because it's admittedly it is the first page that I flip to when the audit comes to me to be able to see, how did we do in that area.
And as it relates to the former, not the latter, the fringe, it certainly is important, but as it relates to efficiency, I thought it was about a 5-point spread, which
my math might be wrong. I apologize.
It comes into about a 10% efficiency increase. So I really want to commend all the folks here on the executive committee. I'll make note, I think that took place since Mr. Byerly and I have been in leadership positions. So our executive bonuses should reflect that end of year bonuses. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you, Dr. Newman. Will you second that? So so as we get those end of the year executive bonuses, we want to thank you in advance. But so those are important to note. I will drop this out there. There is likely to be some discussion. And first of all, let me ask executive committee, is there any discussion about anything on the audit that you've seen, anything from the endorsement, recommendation, the endorsement from Mr. Holland, anything dealing with that at all? Okay, thank you. Be prepared that there likely will be a discussion relating to looking at possibly changing services. I think that's the best way I can predicate that. We may need to look at different audit firms, and I'm seeing some heads nod around the table. We have, you've got some of the big names out there. I can't speak for Cherry Beckert. We have retained them over the years in Hanover, but we've seen some changes. We don't know if they're trying to get out of government business, the business of government audits or not, but PB Mares is out there. But please be prepared that we think we're going to probably have some discussions relating to changing our audit firm. With that, I think we also might need to recognize that could come with a different price tag than what we're normally used to. But the audit that was supposed to be here in November, they got here in December, may be indicative of the price you get, what you pay for. And with the substantial amount of reserves that we have, Mr. Holland,
Yes.
that, we've just moved in such a different direction. And I think our firms and our service providers need to be indicative of the organization that we are now. So there's no action for that, Ms. Heater, but I do think we need to be prepared to have the executive committee prepared that we maybe need to look at some opportunities to review some different audit firms. Is there any additional business, any general comments? None. Okay, perfect. Well, the time is 8:47, Ms. Firestone, and we'll adjourn the executive committee and reconvene for the full commission at 9 a.m. Thank you. We are adjourned.